The teacher expected a nervous parent at the emergency meeting. She didn't expect the most dangerous man in the city to walk in alone and ask why no one told him he had a son. If you love dramatic Mafia romance with shocking reveals and protective heroes, don't forget to subscribe. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? The call came at 1:17 p.m. She knew the exact time because she had been staring at the clock already, waiting for her shift to end. The number on her screen wasn't saved, but she recognized the area code instantly. The school. Her stomach dropped before she even answered. Hello? Hi, this is Ms. Carter from Brookfield Elementary. The teacher's voice was warm, calm, too calm. Yes, she said quickly, already standing up from her desk. Is he okay? Oh, he's fine, Ms. Carter reassured her gently. I don't want you to worry. It's just a small behavioral concern. I thought it might be helpful if we had a quick parent meeting. A small behavioral concern. The words should have relaxed her. Instead, her pulse spiked. What happened? She asked. There was a situation on the playground, Ms. Carter said carefully. Another student was teasing him. It escalated. Your son didn't start it, but he handled it in a way that surprised us. Her chest tightened. How? She whispered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He didn't run to a teacher, Miss Carter explained. He just stood very still and told the other boy that if he touched him again, he would regret it. Silence pressed in. He's 8, she said softly. I know, Miss Carter replied. And that's why I wanted to talk. The tone he used, it wasn't typical. It was very controlled. Controlled. She closed her eyes briefly. Is the other child hurt? She asked. No, Ms. Carter said quickly. No physical altercation, but we do take language seriously. Of course they did. I understand, she said. I'll speak to him tonight. Actually, Ms. Carter continued gently, I'd prefer if we discussed it together. Perhaps tomorrow after school? Just you and me. Tomorrow, her mind raced. Tomorrow she could manage. Tomorrow she could prepare. Yes, she said. That's fine. There was a pause. And if for any reason you're unavailable, Ms. Carter added, tone shifting slightly toward procedural, we can reach out to the secondary emergency contact listed on his file. Her hand tightened around the phone. Secondary emergency contact. She felt the blood drain from her face. That won't be necessary, she said too quickly. It's just standard policy, the teacher said reassuringly. We always include all guardians in behavioral meetings. Guardians, the word scraped. There's only me, she said. Another pause. Well, Ms. Carter said carefully, the form lists another name. Her breath stopped. She had almost removed it last year. Almost. But something, guilt maybe, had stopped her. It's outdated, she said quietly. He's not involved. I understand, Ms. Carter replied politely. Still, for transparency, we're required to inform both listed contacts unless you provide updated documentation. Documentation, paperwork, proof of absence. She hadn't realized how permanent ink could feel. I'll be there tomorrow, she said firmly. You won't need to call anyone else. Of course, Ms. Carter replied warmly. We just want to support him. He's very bright. Intense, but bright. Intense. She ended the call slowly. Her hands were shaking. Not because her son had stood up to a bully, but because of the name on that form. And the name she had written in a moment of weakness years ago, when filling out enrollment papers under fluorescent lights, when the receptionist had asked for emergency contacts and she had hesitated too long. Father's name? She had left it blank. Emergency contact? And without thinking, without planning, she had written his. Not because she expected the school to call him, because somewhere inside her, she couldn't erase him completely. Now, the possibility of that number being dialed felt catastrophic. She imagined the call reaching him, imagined a secretary forwarding it, imagined him hearing the school's name, her son's name. Her pulse pounded harder. He didn't know. He couldn't know. The entire point of leaving had been to keep worlds separate, to keep her son's life quiet, predictable, free from the gravity of a man who moved cities with a phone call. She looked down at her desk calendar. Tomorrow. She could handle tomorrow. She would walk into that school office calmly. She would smile. She would explain that her son had simply defended himself. She would sign whatever form they required. She would update the emergency contact list. Erase the name properly this time. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Unknown, but not unfamiliar. I received a call from Brookfield Elementary. Her heart stopped. She hadn't updated the number. She hadn't changed it, and the school had not waited for tomorrow. The second message came before she could breathe. We need to discuss why I'm listed as the emergency contact for a child I was never told about. The room felt too small. The routine call had become something else entirely. And somewhere across the city, the most dangerous man she had ever loved had just learned the name of her son. She had planned to fix it. That was the cruelest part. After the first text, she had typed 3 responses and deleted them all. She had left work early, driven straight to the school office, rehearsing calm explanations the entire way. But she had arrived too late. The meeting had already been rescheduled. Ms. Carter stepped out for a few minutes. The receptionist had told her apologetically, "We couldn't reach you earlier, so we contacted the secondary emergency number." The words still echoed in her ears hours later. "We contacted the secondary emergency number." She sat in her car now, engine off, hands still gripping the steering wheel. The school building looked harmless in the afternoon light. Brick, murals, small backpacks bouncing through the doors. Normal. Inside that building, someone had dialed a number she had not heard out loud in 8 years. She could picture it too clearly. The secretary scrolling through the enrollment file. The neat block letters of his name. The unfamiliar corporate number listed beneath it. She had never expected it to be used. She had written it in a moment of weakness during registration, when the forms had felt endless and impersonal. Father's name, left blank. Emergency contact. She had hesitated, and then she had written it. Not because she thought he would ever be called, but because somewhere deep inside her, she couldn't erase him completely. Now the school had done what protocol required. They had called, and he had answered. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to look. The first message had been controlled. I received a call from Brookfield Elementary. The second had been sharper. We need to discuss why I'm listed as the emergency contact for a child I was never told about. She finally unlocked her phone. A third message waited. The principal confirmed the child's full name. Her breath caught painfully. He knew the name. Her son's name. Not a nickname. Not a guess. The full legal name she had chosen carefully to avoid anything traceable to his world. Her mind raced through logistics. How much had they said? Had the school mentioned the behavioral incident? Had they described the boy's temperament? Had they described his face? The office phone call replayed in her head from the receptionist's perspective. "Hello, Mr. Moretti. This is Brookfield Elementary. You're listed as the emergency contact for—" She shut her eyes. Of course he had answered. Men like him didn't miss calls from unknown numbers. They had people to screen them, assistants to forward anything labeled urgent. A school calling about a child listed under his name would have been flagged immediately. She pictured him pausing mid-meeting, looking at the screen, hearing the words. Her son. Emergency contact. Behavioral concern. The thought made her stomach twist. Her phone vibrated again. This time it rang. His name didn't appear. Just the number she had memorized once upon a time. She stared at it until it nearly went to voicemail. Then she answered. Silence met her first. Not background noise, not traffic. Just measured breathing. "You left my name on a school document," he said finally. His voice hadn't changed. Lower than most. Controlled. Calm in a way that felt more dangerous than shouting. It was a mistake, she said quickly. No, he replied. Mistakes are accidental. Her throat tightened. They called me, he continued, about a child who shares your last name. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel briefly. It's not what you think, she whispered. Then explain, he said. No anger, no raised voice, just expectation. She swallowed. They couldn't reach me, she said. It was routine. Routine doesn't involve my name, he replied. She could hear the edge now, the restraint wearing thin. What did they tell you? She asked quietly. That he was involved in a behavioral incident, he said. That he handled it calmly. That he used language that concerned them. Her heart pounded. Of course they'd mentioned that. They said he didn't flinch, he added. The words landed heavy. Didn't flinch, her son's stillness, his measured tone. Traits she had tried to convince herself came from her. They asked if I would attend a parent meeting tomorrow, he continued. Her breath caught. And what did you say? She asked. I said yes. The word reverberated in the silence between them. You can't, she said immediately. I can, he replied. You don't understand what that will look like. I understand exactly what it will look like, he said calmly. She could picture it now. Black cars at the curb, parents whispering, teachers stiffening, the most powerful man in the city walking into a small elementary school office. Alone. You were never supposed to know, she whispered. That's the problem, he replied. Silence stretched. You listed me, he said finally. Not as father, but as emergency contact. Her chest tightened. That wasn't random, he added. No, it hadn't been. You don't get to hide him and call me when it's convenient, he said quietly. I didn't call you, she said. The school did, he replied, because you put my name there. She closed her eyes. This was the contact she had never expected to be used, and the number she had written down hoping it would remain ink on paper. Protocol had turned it into revelation. You should update the file, he said. I will, she whispered. Too late, he replied. Her pulse quickened. Tomorrow, he continued calmly. I'm attending that meeting. She felt the world tilt. You can't just walk into his school, she said. He's my son, he replied. The words settled like a final verdict. And for the first time since the routine call had come in, she understood something with painful clarity. This wasn't about a playground incident anymore. It was about a name that had finally been spoken aloud. The cars arrived 5 minutes before the final bell. That was deliberate. Parents were already lining the sidewalk, coffee cups in hand, phones out, half distracted and half alert the way they always were at pickup. Children's artwork fluttered in the hallway windows. A crossing guard adjusted her vest. It was an ordinary Thursday, until the engines rolled in. The first black sedan turned the corner slowly, polished to a mirror shine. The second followed. Then a third. All identical. All deliberate. They didn't speed. They didn't blare music. They didn't make a spectacle of themselves. They simply occupied space. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Is that for someone? Is there a field trip? Is this some kind of donor visit? Parents stepped subtly out of the way as the cars aligned along the curb where minivans usually idled. Inside the school office, Ms. Carter looked up from her desk at the low rumble of engines outside. The receptionist frowned. That's unusual, she murmured. The door of the middle car opened. He stepped out alone. No entourage visible. No bodyguards crowding his shoulders. Just him. Dark suit. No tie. Expression controlled to the point of severity. He didn't rush. He didn't glance around in confusion. He surveyed the building once, measured, assessing, and then began walking toward the entrance. A hush followed him, not because anyone recognized him immediately, but because presence like that didn't need introduction. At the curb, two mothers leaned toward each other. Do you know who that is? I think I've seen him in the news. The crossing guard straightened instinctively as he passed. He nodded once in acknowledgement. Polite, composed. But there was something beneath the surface. Not panic, not chaos. Fury, cold and contained. He entered the building without waiting to be escorted. Inside the office, the receptionist stood abruptly. "Sir, can I help you?" "Yes," he said calmly. "I'm here for the parent meeting regarding Daniel Rivera." Ms. Carter's stomach dropped. She recognized the name on the file, the secondary emergency contact. "Are you?" she began carefully. "I'm listed," he replied evenly. There was no arrogance in the statement, just fact. The receptionist glanced at the screen. The name matched. The room felt smaller suddenly. "Of course," Ms. Carter said, forcing a professional smile. "We were expecting the mother." "She's aware," he replied. His eyes moved once around the office, took in the framed class photos, the bright posters, the tiny plastic chairs. This was not his world, and yet he stood inside it without hesitation. Outside, more parents had begun to notice the cars. Phones tilted discreetly, whispers grew louder. Why would someone like that be here? "Is something wrong?" Back in the office, Ms. Carter gestured toward the small conference room. "Right this way." He followed without comment. His steps were measured. His hands relaxed at his sides. But the tension was visible in the set of his jaw. They entered the room. A single empty chair sat across from the teacher's desk. He did not sit immediately. "When was the call placed?" he asked. "Yesterday afternoon," Ms. Carter replied cautiously. "And the mother?" he asked. "She confirmed she would attend," Ms. Carter said, his gaze sharpened slightly. "And yet I was contacted first." It wasn't a question. "It's standard protocol if a parent is unavailable," Ms. Carter explained. His expression did not change. "Protocol," he repeated quietly. Outside, the final bell rang. Children flooded into the hallway. The noise echoed faintly into the office. His gaze flicked briefly toward the sound. Something flickered there. Protectiveness. Sharp and immediate. Miss Carter folded her hands carefully. "There was a minor incident," she began. "I'm aware," he interrupted softly. "I'd like to hear it from you." She swallowed. "He was teased," she explained. "Another boy provoked him repeatedly. She hesitated. The child did not escalate physically." His jaw tightened. "What did he do?" he asked. "He stood very still," she said, "and informed the other child that if he touched him again, there would be consequences." Silence filled the room. "That concerns you?" he asked evenly. "The tone concerned us," she clarified. "It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic." "No," he agreed quietly. Outside the conference room window, parents craned subtly for a better look. The black cars remained parked like silent witnesses. Inside, he finally sat. Slowly. Controlled. He rested his hands flat on the table. "Did he initiate contact?" he asked. "No." "Did he strike anyone?" "No." Then he defended himself verbally. "Yes, but, he finished calmly, "you are unsettled by how he did it." Ms. Carter hesitated. "Yes." His gaze hardened just slightly. "He didn't flinch," she added. A muscle in his jaw moved. "No," he said again. The door opened suddenly. Footsteps rushed in the hallway. And then she appeared, breathless, pale, eyes wide. She froze in the doorway. He looked at her once, and the fury that had been carefully contained became visible. Not explosive, not loud, but unmistakable. Not because of the incident, because he had learned about his son from a school secretary. And for the first time, the quiet school office understood that this was no routine meeting. This was a collision between secrecy and a father who had just been called to the curb. The chair across from Ms. Carter's desk remained empty. It wasn't dramatic at first, just absence, A purse not placed on the table, a coat not draped over the backrest, a mother not present to soften the room. Miss Carter adjusted the folder in front of her and offered a polite smile to the man seated opposite. "We'll give her a few more minutes," she said gently. "Traffic can be unpredictable." He inclined his head once. "Of course." His voice was steady, controlled, almost detached, but his eyes flicked toward the door every time footsteps passed in the hallway. The black cars outside had already drawn attention. Teachers had pretended not to stare. Parents had whispered before drifting away with their children. Now the building was quieter. Pickup nearly finished. Inside the conference room, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. Ms. Carter cleared her throat. "I appreciate you coming on short notice. It's always helpful when family is involved." He did not correct her. She glanced at the form on her desk. Secondary emergency contact. Name, Alessandro Moretti. Relationship, guardian. She hesitated. "Are you an uncle?" she asked cautiously. "Or perhaps a godfather?" He folded his hands loosely in front of him. "I'm listed as the emergency contact," he replied. "Yes, of course," she said quickly, nodding. "We just like to understand family dynamics. It helps us contextualize behavior." Family dynamics. His expression shifted. Barely. "Context," he repeated softly. "Yes," she continued, unaware of the shift in gravity. "Daniel is very self-contained. Intense for his age. We sometimes see that when children have strong male figures in their lives." A faint muscle ticked along his jaw. "Strong?" he echoed. She smiled politely. "It's not a negative, just something we like to be aware of. Does he spend much time with you?" The door at the end of the hallway slammed shut. Footsteps echoed. Small. Fast. And then, "Ms. Carter." Daniel burst into the doorway without knocking. He stopped short when he saw the man seated at the table. The air shifted. Ms. Carter stood quickly. "Daniel, sweetie, we're in the middle of a meeting." The boy didn't look at her. He was staring at the man. Head tilted slightly. Eyes steady. The room went completely still. For a split second, something primal passed between them. Recognition without explanation. Familiarity without introduction. The man rose slowly from his chair. Not abruptly, not aggressively. Just enough to meet the boy's eye level without looming. Daniel's breath caught. Not in fear, in understanding. "You came," he said quietly. Ms. Carter blinked. "Daniel?" The boy took 2 steps forward. "You came," he repeated, voice softer now. The man swallowed once before answering. "Yes." Miss Carter glanced between them, confused. "I didn't know you were coming," Daniel continued. "Mom said you're busy." The room felt smaller. "I made time," the man replied. There was no performance in it. No theatrics, just fact. Daniel looked at the empty chair across the table. "That's for Mom," he said. "She's always late when she's nervous." Ms. Carter froze. "Nervous?" she echoed. Daniel nodded absently, still staring at the man. "She doesn't like when teachers call." A faint shadow crossed the man's face. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because she thinks people will ask about you." Silence detonated inside the room. Ms. Carter's smile faltered. "Ask about him?" she clarified gently. Daniel looked at her like she'd asked something obvious. "Yeah," he said. "My dad." The word fell like a dropped glass. Ms. Carter's hand slipped slightly on the edge of the desk. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. Your father?" Daniel nodded again, impatient now. "Yes." He looked back at the man. "You're my dad." There was no accusation in it, no drama, just clarity. The man did not react outwardly, but something in his posture changed. Less restraint, more certainty. "Yes," he said. One word. Steady. Unapologetic. Ms. Carter felt the room tilt. "But the paperwork," she started weakly, eyes darting toward the file. Daniel shrugged. Mom said we don't talk about it. The empty chair across the table suddenly felt like evidence. Miss Carter stared at the man in front of her. Not an uncle. Not a distant guardian. Not a family friend. A father. One she had called yesterday as a secondary contact. One she had unknowingly summoned into her small school office without understanding the weight of that decision. The door swung open again. This time she stood there. Breathless. Pale. Eyes wide with panic and something dangerously close to regret. She took in the scene in one glance. Her son standing between them. The empty chair. The teacher's expression. And him. He did not look at her immediately. His gaze was still on the boy. You said you were busy, Daniel repeated softly. The man finally looked up, met her eyes, and the fury that had been simmering beneath his composure became visible. Not loud, not explosive, just absolute. You told him I was busy, he said quietly. She stepped into the room slowly. I told him you weren't here, she whispered. Daniel frowned slightly confused. But you are, he said. The truth hung in the air like something fragile and irreversible. And for the first time since the meeting had begun, the empty chair no longer represented absence. It represented a secret. One that had just been spoken aloud, in a school office, under fluorescent lights, by a child who didn't understand that some truths were supposed to stay buried. The silence after Daniel's words did not break cleanly. It lingered, heavy. Miss Carter cleared her throat gently, trying to regain control of the room. Daniel, sweetheart, why don't you wait outside with Mrs. Alvarez for a moment? He hesitated, glancing between the two adults like he understood he had just stepped into something bigger than playground politics. It's okay, his mother said softly, forcing a smile that didn't quite hold. Go sit with Mrs. Alvarez. He nodded slowly and slipped out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him, and the air changed. Ms. Carter reached for the enrollment file on her desk, fingers suddenly less steady than they had been before. She opened it to the first page. Standard intake form, emergency contacts, medical notes. Her eyes moved automatically to the section labeled Father's Name. There was a line through it. Not a neat correction. Not a single, deliberate strike. It had been scribbled over, heavily, as if someone had changed their mind halfway through writing. Beneath the thick black ink, barely visible, was a name pressed into the paper with enough force to leave an indentation. Alessandro Moretti. Below it, written in blue pen in a different handwriting. Not involved. Ms. Carter blinked. She flipped to the emergency contact section. Primary guardian, Elena Rivera. Secondary contact, A. Moretti. Relationship, guardian. The word guardian had been added in pen. Different ink. Different pressure. Different moment. She looked up slowly. You filled this out? She asked the mother. Her lips parted, then pressed together again. Yes. You crossed out the father's name? Yes. And rewrote him as a guardian. Her silence was answer enough. The man did not move. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react to the physical evidence of erasure in front of him. But his gaze had sharpened. You told us he wasn't involved, Miss Carter continued gently, confusion threading through her professionalism. But his name is here. It was written first. Her fingers traced the indentation in the paper. You pressed hard when you wrote it, she added softly. The mother's throat tightened. I changed my mind, she whispered. Mrs. Carter looked between them. This isn't just paperwork, she said carefully. These forms are legal declarations. We rely on them. The man finally spoke. Did you contact him because his name was legible? He asked calmly. Ms. Carter nodded. Our system flags all listed emergency contacts. When we couldn't confirm the mother's availability yesterday afternoon, protocol required us to call the secondary number. The mother inhaled sharply. I told you I would be here, she said, voice thin. You were unreachable, Ms. Carter replied gently. Your phone went straight to voicemail. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the man, and his did not. The room felt smaller again. Ms. Carter turned another page. Hospital records, immunization forms, a note clipped to the back. Amended birth record, filed 6 months after initial registration. Her brows furrowed. "This document," she murmured. She pulled it free. The original birth certificate listed no father. The amended version included one, filed months later. Quietly, the signature was there. The same name pressed deep into the paper. Alessandro Moretti. Ms. Carter looked up slowly. "You amended this record." The mother's hands trembled in her lap. "Yes." "Why?" Ms. Carter asked gently. Before she could answer, the man spoke. "Because someone told her not to." The words were quiet, but they cut through the room. Mrs. Carter stared at him. "Is that true?" she asked. The mother closed her eyes. "I was advised to leave it blank," she said softly. "By whom?" Silence. The man's jaw tightened. "You crossed out his name," Ms. Carter continued carefully, "but you couldn't erase it completely." The mother's breath shook. "I thought if it wasn't official," she whispered, "if it wasn't printed everywhere." "He wouldn't know," Ms. Carter finished gently. The man didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. But the way his gaze dropped to the indentation on the page, where his name had once been written in full, said enough. "You tried to hide it," Ms. Carter said. "Yes," the mother admitted. "From him?" Her eyes flicked toward the man. "From everyone." The silence that followed wasn't accusatory. It was understanding. Ms. Carter closed the folder slowly. "I need to document this discrepancy," she said carefully, "for the record." The mother flinched. The man's voice remained steady. "You will," he said, "but you will also document that I was not informed." Ms. Carter nodded once. "I will." The folder sat between them like a confession. Ink scratched out, names rewritten, intentions blurred by fear. Miss Carter looked at the mother one last time. "You didn't remove his name because he wasn't the father," she said quietly. The mother's lips trembled. "No. You removed it because you were afraid of what it meant." The answer hung there, unspoken, but undeniable. And for the first time since the meeting began, the issue was no longer about playground behavior. It was about a name someone had tried to erase. And the man sitting across from them, who had just learned exactly how close he had come to disappearing from his son's life, by a single line of ink. The door closed softly, not slammed, not dramatic. Just a quiet click that sealed the small office off from the hallway noise and the hum of after-school chatter. Inside, the air felt different. He remained standing. The teacher sat. The mother hovered near the window like she might disappear through it if the tension grew sharp enough. Miss Carter folded her hands on top of the file. "I want to clarify something before we go any further," she began carefully. "The situation on the playground did not result in physical harm." His eyes lifted to hers. "But there was intent," he said. She hesitated. "Yes." He nodded once. "Start from the beginning." There was no raised voice, no threat, no visible anger. But the temperature in the room dropped. Ms. Carter inhaled slowly. "Another student, Ethan Morales, approached Daniel during recess. There's been teasing for a few weeks now. Nothing severe at first, just comments." "What kind of comments?" he asked. "About his quietness, about the way he watches instead of playing. Children can be cruel without realizing it." His jaw flexed. "And?" "Yesterday it escalated," she continued. "Ethan shoved him. Not hard, but deliberately." The mother stiffened. "You didn't tell me that," she whispered. "I didn't want to alarm you before speaking in person," Miss Carter replied gently. He didn't move. "What did my son do?" he asked. "He didn't retaliate," she said. "He didn't cry. He didn't call for a teacher." "Then what?" "He stepped back," she said. "Very calm. Very still." His eyes darkened slightly. And he told Ethan that if he touched him again, there would be consequences. Silence filled the office. Not shock. Recognition. You consider that alarming, he said quietly. It wasn't what he said, Ms. Carter admitted. It was how he said it. How? There was no emotion in it. The mother's breath caught. Ms. Carter continued carefully. He didn't sound frightened. He didn't sound angry. He sounded certain. The man's hand curled slightly at his side. That certainty made the other child back away, she added. Good, he replied. Ms. Carter blinked. We encourage de-escalation, she clarified quickly. But we also worry about children who internalize confrontation. His gaze sharpened. Did he report the bullying to you before this? She hesitated. No. Did you know it was ongoing? We suspected tension, she admitted, but nothing documented. And you never contacted me. It wasn't a question. Her posture stiffened slightly. We contacted the primary guardian, she said. And when that failed, she glanced down at the file. We attempted the secondary number once. Once, he repeated. Yes. His voice remained calm. Was my voicemail full? No. Was I unreachable? No. Then why was I not informed of weeks of bullying before it escalated? The question hung in the air. Ms. Carter swallowed. We prioritize the parent listed as primary over the father, he finished. The word landed heavier than it should have. The mother flinched. Ms. Carter chose her words carefully. Over the guardian designated as primary decision-maker. He leaned forward slightly, placing his hands on the edge of the desk. Was my son physically harmed? No. Emotionally? She hesitated. He did not appear distressed. Because he doesn't show distress easily, the mother whispered. The man's eyes flicked to her. And how do you know that? He asked quietly. She looked away. Silence stretched. Ms. Carter interjected gently. We're not questioning your involvement. We simply followed procedure. He straightened slowly. Procedure, he echoed again. The mother stepped forward finally. You don't get to be angry about this, she said softly. You weren't here. His gaze snapped to hers. I wasn't told. That was my choice. That was not your right, he replied, still calm, but now unmistakably furious. The quiet in the office became suffocating. He turned back to the teacher. If another child places hands on him again, he said, voice low and controlled, I expect documentation. I expect notification. And I expect accountability. Ms. Carter nodded quickly. Of course. I do not care about playground politics, he continued. I care about patterns. There will be a mediation between the boys, she offered. There will be supervision, he corrected. Yes. And I will be included in all future communication. Ms. Carter glanced at the mother before nodding. Understood. The man stepped back from the desk. His anger never spilled over. It never became loud. But it filled the room like a storm contained behind glass. The mother's voice broke the silence. He handled it, she whispered. He didn't hit back. He looked at her. That's not the point. What is the point? She asked. His eyes softened just slightly. He stood alone, he said. The truth of it cut deeper than the shove ever could have. Outside the office window, children laughed in the courtyard. Ordinary life resumed. Inside, something had shifted. This wasn't about a playground scuffle. It was about a boy who had learned to defend himself without flinching, and a father who had just realized he had not been there to see it happen. The quiet office held the weight of it. Not chaos, not violence, just fury. Cold, measured, and very, very awake. They found him in the courtyard. Daniel sat on the low concrete wall near the edge of the playground, elbows resting on his knees, a half-finished juice box balanced carefully between his hands. The after-school crowd had thinned. Only a few children remained, waiting for pickup, their voices drifting across the asphalt in scattered bursts of laughter. He wasn't laughing. He was watching. Not nervously, not anxiously. Just observing. The man slowed as he approached, as if crossing an invisible boundary. The mother followed a step behind, her pulse loud in her ears. "Daniel," she called softly. He turned at once. His gaze went to her first, automatically, checking. Then it shifted to the man beside her. He didn't look startled. He didn't look shy. He didn't look uncertain. He looked curious. There was something almost clinical about it. The man stopped a few feet away, giving him space. Daniel slid off the wall and stood straight. Too straight. Shoulders back, chin level. Still. The resemblance wasn't in the eyes this time. It was in the posture. The mother felt it like a physical ache. "You're not leaving again, right?" Daniel asked simply. No accusation, no pleading, just information gathering. The man's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "I'm not leaving," he said. Daniel nodded once. "Okay." That was it. No dramatic reaction. No emotional overflow. Just acceptance. The man studied him now, the way Daniel had studied him earlier. Measured, assessing. "You weren't scared," he said quietly. Daniel shrugged slightly. "Of what?" "Of me," he clarified. Daniel tilted his head. "Why would I be?" The mother's breath caught. The man didn't answer immediately. "Some people are," he said. Daniel considered that. "They don't know you," he concluded. The simplicity of it hit harder than doubt would have. The boy stepped a little closer, not into reach, not reckless. Just enough to reduce the distance. He looked at the man's hands. "You don't shake," Daniel observed. The mother's pulse spiked. "What?" she asked softly. "Most grown-ups shake when they're mad," Daniel explained. "You don't." The man glanced down at his own hands. They were steady, always steady. "Neither do you," he replied. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't react at all. "I don't get mad like that," he said. "How do you get mad?" the man asked. Daniel thought about it seriously. "I get quiet." The mother closed her eyes briefly. Of course he did. The man nodded slowly. "That's dangerous," he said softly. Daniel looked up at him. "Why?" "Because people don't see it coming." The boy absorbed that without flinching. "That's the point," he said. The mother's heart thudded. There it was again. Not learned behavior. Not mimicry. Instinct. The man crouched slightly, not enough to loom, just enough to meet him at eye level. "Why didn't you tell your teacher the teasing was happening before?" he asked. Daniel shrugged. "It wasn't important. Someone putting hands on you is important." Daniel held his gaze. "I handled it!" The words weren't boastful. They were factual. The man's jaw tightened slightly. "You shouldn't have to," he said. Daniel frowned faintly, as if that idea hadn't occurred to him. "Why not?" The man hesitated. "Because you're 8. Daniel tilted his head again. "You were 8 once." The mother inhaled sharply. The man blinked once. "Yes." "Did you need help?" Daniel asked. The question landed heavier than any accusation. The man didn't answer immediately. "No," he said finally. Daniel nodded, satisfied. "Me neither." The silence between them wasn't hostile. It wasn't awkward. It felt aligned. The mother watched in quiet disbelief. She had expected fear, confusion, maybe resentment. Instead, her son was analyzing him like a mirror. "You stand like me," Daniel said suddenly. The man's brows lifted slightly. "How do I stand?" Daniel stepped back and squared his shoulders. "Like this." The resemblance was undeniable now. Weight balanced evenly, chin steady, stillness without stiffness. The man rose slowly to his full height. "You're observant," he said. Daniel shrugged. "You're loud without talking," he added thoughtfully. The mother swallowed. "What does that mean?" she asked gently. "It means people move when he walks," Daniel replied. The man exhaled slowly. "And you notice that?" Daniel nodded. "I notice everything." The words were simple, unadorned, true. The man looked at the mother then, something shifting behind his eyes. "You taught him that?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No." Daniel stepped closer again. "You don't scare me," he said plainly. The man crouched once more, bringing himself fully level. "I don't want to." Daniel studied him one last time. "You won't lie to me?" he asked. The courtyard felt suddenly fragile. The man didn't hesitate. "No." Daniel nodded once. "Okay." And just like that, the tension dissolved. The boy didn't flinch, didn't retreat, didn't cling to his mother's leg. He simply accepted him. As if blood recognized itself. As if posture and silence and steadiness were languages only they spoke fluently. The mother watched the two of them standing there, mirrors separated by years, and realized something both terrifying and inevitable. Her son had never needed to be told who his father was. He had simply known, not by name, not by paperwork, but by the way he stood, and the way he didn't flinch. The door opened too fast. It hit the stopper with a sharp, hollow sound that echoed down the quiet hallway. She stood there for half a second like she wasn't sure her legs would carry her any farther. Breathless. Pale. One hand still gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The receptionist looked up from her desk. "Ma'am, I'm here," she said quickly, already moving past her. "For the meeting." Ms. Carter rose from her chair inside the conference room, relief flashing briefly across her face. Then confusion, then something heavier as she caught the look in the woman's eyes. Not confusion, not annoyance. Fear. The man was already standing. He didn't rush toward her. He didn't step back either. He just watched her. And when their eyes met, the air changed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no accusations spilling out immediately. But something in that locked gaze carried history. Weight. An entire past compressed into 1 second of recognition. "You're late," he said quietly. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sharp. But it wasn't neutral either. "Traffic," she almost said. "Work ran late. My phone died." All the small, polite lies people use to soften tension. Instead, she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Ms. Carter's stomach tightened. This wasn't an uncle stepping in. This wasn't a confused emergency contact. This was something else. "He's on the file," Ms. Carter said carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. "When we couldn't reach you yesterday, we followed protocol." The mother closed her eyes for a moment, like the word protocol physically hurt. "I told you I would come," she said. "And you didn't answer," the man replied. His tone remained calm, controlled, but beneath it was something coiled and contained. She stepped fully into the room now, closing the door behind her. The click sounded louder than it should have. Her son stood near the corner of the office, quiet and watchful. When he saw her, he moved instinctively toward her side. She dropped to her knees immediately, pulling him into her chest. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He nodded against her shoulder. "I told them I handled it," he murmured. Her breath caught. She smoothed his hair. "I know." When she stood again, she didn't look at the teacher first. She looked at him. "You had no right," she said softly, his jaw flexed. "I'm listed. That was a mistake." "No," he said. "It was not." The teacher's gaze flicked between them. "You crossed his name out," Ms. Carter said quietly, holding up the enrollment form, "and then rewrote it. That's not a mistake. That's intention." The mother's lips parted, then pressed together again. Her son looked up at her, confused. "Why would you cross it out?" he asked. Silence flooded the room. She swallowed hard. "Because," she began, voice fragile now, "sometimes grown-ups think they're protecting people by hiding things." "From who?" Daniel asked. Her eyes flicked toward the man before she could stop herself. Mrs. Carter saw it, and suddenly everything aligned. The amended birth certificate, the crossed-out father's name, the secondary emergency contact no one expected to be used. This wasn't clerical confusion. It was concealment. "You weren't confused about his role," Ms. Carter said slowly. The mother didn't respond. "You were trying to erase it." The man exhaled once, long and controlled. "Why?" he asked quietly. The question wasn't angry. It was worse. It was wounded. She shook her head. "This is not the place," she whispered. "It became the place the moment you wrote my name, and hoped it would never be dialed," he replied. Her shoulders sagged. "I didn't want this," she said. "You didn't want me here," he corrected. Their eyes locked again. The teacher felt like an intruder now. Not in a dispute, but in something far older and more complicated. "This isn't about the playground," Ms. Carter said gently. "No," the man replied. "It's about him," the mother whispered. Her son looked between them. "Why is everyone acting like I did something bad?" he asked quietly. Her heart shattered at the edges. "You didn't," she said immediately. He frowned. "Then why are you scared?" The question hit like a dropped glass. She knelt in front of him again. "I'm not scared of you," she said. His gaze shifted slowly to the man standing across the room. "You're scared of him?" The room went silent. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just waited. She inhaled shakily. "I was," she admitted. The teacher's breath caught. Not scared of him now, scared of what he meant, scared of the life she'd tried to outrun, scared of the moment that had finally arrived in fluorescent light and folding chairs. The man's voice dropped. "I never asked you to run." She laughed weakly. "You didn't have to." Ms. Carter stepped back slightly, giving them space she hadn't realized they needed. This wasn't misunderstanding. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a secret that had lived quietly in paperwork and crossed out ink. And now, it stood in front of her desk, breathing. "I won't do this here," the mother said finally, wiping at her eyes. "You already did," he replied. The truth hovered between them like something fragile and irreversible. The teacher looked down at the file in her hands, then back at the two adults standing inches apart, but worlds away. This wasn't about discipline. It wasn't about school protocol. It wasn't about a behavioral note. It was about a name someone had tried to bury. And the moment it was spoken out loud, it stopped being a secret. The mother's breath was still uneven. The man's fury was still contained. And in that quiet office under fluorescent lights and beside crayon drawings taped to the wall, the teacher understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't confusion. This was history. And it had just walked back through the door. The hallway outside the office had gone quiet. Most of the children were gone. The last bus had already pulled away, leaving behind the faint smell of exhaust and the distant echo of laughter. Inside the small conference room, the fluorescent lights hummed softly, too bright for a conversation like this. Daniel sat in the corner now, legs crossed, quietly stacking plastic blocks he'd found in a classroom bin. He wasn't listening, at least not obviously. But he was close enough to hear every word. She noticed that. And for the first time since walking into the building, she stopped trying to manage the moment. She just looked at him. At the man standing across from her, hands steady at his sides, fury contained beneath discipline. "You want the truth?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he replied. She swallowed. "It wasn't about you," she said. "Not at first." His eyes didn't soften. Then what was it about? She closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, the fear she had carried for years wasn't hidden anymore. It started with a message, she said. He went completely still. What message? I was 6 months pregnant, she continued. You were in Rome. I was in the apartment alone. A number I didn't recognize texted me. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. It said, "Tell him to step back, or the child pays." The air in the room shifted. He didn't interrupt, didn't curse, but something in his posture changed, sharpened. I thought it was a joke, she said, or a scare tactic. From who? He asked, voice low. I don't know. That hurt him more than accusation would have. I tried to ignore it, she went on. Then there was another message, this time with a photo. She swallowed. Of me leaving the clinic. The silence deepened. They knew where I was. They knew my appointments. They knew about the baby before I told anyone. His jaw tightened. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Because I know you. His eyes flashed. I know what you would have done. And what is that? He asked. You would have gone to war. The words hung between them. He didn't deny it. I didn't want a war built around a newborn, she continued. I didn't want our child to be leverage in a power struggle. She glanced at Daniel, who was still stacking blocks carefully, his back turned, but his posture alert. I chose distance, she whispered. I chose silence. You chose to erase me, he corrected quietly. Her gaze snapped back to him. I chose to protect him. His voice sharpened slightly. By cutting me out. Yes, she said without hesitation. Because if they couldn't see you connected to him, he was less valuable. The logic was brutal, calculated, and heartbreakingly consistent with survival. You think my name makes him a target? He said. I know it does, she replied. His silence confirmed more than denial ever could. For months, she continued, I slept with the lights on. I checked windows twice. I jumped at every car door outside. She swallowed hard. And you were negotiating shipping contracts like nothing had changed. That cut. He exhaled slowly. You didn't give me the chance to protect you. I didn't want your protection, she said sharply. I wanted his anonymity. Her hands pressed flat against the table. I thought if I disappeared quietly, if I didn't provoke anyone, if I didn't call you, didn't accuse anyone, didn't escalate, then the threat would fade. And did it? He asked. She hesitated. Yes, she admitted. Eventually. His eyes darkened. You don't know that. I do, she said, because they stopped. He studied her carefully. And if they were waiting? Her breath hitched. That's the risk I took. Daniel's small voice broke the tension. Who was waiting? They both turned toward him. He hadn't moved, but he was listening. She walked over and knelt in front of him. Some people don't like when powerful men have things they love, she said gently. He frowned. Why? Because it gives them control. He absorbed that silently. The man stepped closer now, but not enough to overshadow them. You should have told me, he said quietly. I was terrified of what telling you would cost, she replied. And what did silence cost? He asked. The question landed heavy. She looked down at Daniel. At least he had peace, she whispered. He crouched down across from her, bringing himself to eye level, not to intimidate, but to be seen. You think I would have let him be raised in war? She met his gaze. I think you would have ended one. He didn't look away. Yes, he said. The certainty in his voice was both terrifying and reassuring. That's exactly what I was afraid of, she replied. The truth hung between them, raw and unfiltered. I didn't hide him because I didn't love you, she said softly. Then why? He asked again. Because loving you meant knowing the enemies you collect, she answered. Silence. Then finally, I thought distance would make him invisible. He stood slowly. Distance doesn't make blood invisible, he said. Daniel looked between them, quiet but thoughtful. So you were hiding me? He asked. She nodded. Yes. He considered that. Did it work? She hesitated. I don't know anymore. The man's voice was steady when he spoke again. You didn't betray me. Her eyes filled. You survived, he continued, but you underestimated something. What? That I would rather fight with you than lose him without knowing. The weight of that settled deep in her chest. For years, she had believed silence was mercy. Now she wasn't sure. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Daniel resumed stacking his blocks, and the truth she had buried for nearly a decade finally sat in the open. No longer crossed out in ink, no longer hidden in amended paperwork. Distance had been her shield, but it had never been permanent. The parking lot looked ordinary again. Late afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the pavement. A few remaining parents buckled their children into car seats. A janitor propped open the side door to take out trash. The crossing guard removed her vest and folded it neatly over one arm. If someone had walked by at that moment, they would have seen nothing unusual. Just a mother, a child, and a man standing slightly behind them. Daniel skipped a step ahead of them toward the gate, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Can we get ice cream? He asked, turning halfway around as he walked. We'll see, she replied automatically, her mind still heavy with the conversation inside. He laughed and spun once on his heel before facing forward again. That was when it happened. A click. Soft, almost swallowed by the hum of distant traffic. The man heard it first. His head shifted slightly to the right. Not obvious. Just enough. Across the street near a gray sedan parked crookedly against the curb, a man stood too still. Ball cap low, phone held vertically. Not texting, not scrolling. Aimed. Another click. Daniel froze mid-step, sensing the shift in energy before understanding it. What is it? He asked quietly. The mother followed the direction of the man's gaze. Her stomach dropped. The phone was pointed at her son. The world narrowed instantly. The man didn't shout, didn't run. He simply moved. Two men appeared from opposite ends of the block as if they had always been there. One crossed behind the gray sedan. The other approached from the sidewalk without breaking stride. The photographer lowered the phone a fraction too late. You're mistaken, he began casually. The man beside her didn't respond. He stepped forward just enough to place himself between Daniel and the street. Not touching the boy. Shielding him. The gray sedan's door opened slightly, then stopped when one of the approaching men leaned in and placed a hand calmly on the edge of it. Delete it, the man said quietly to the photographer. The mother's pulse thundered in her ears. Daniel looked up at her. Why was he taking pictures? He asked. She couldn't answer. The photographer tried to laugh it off. Public sidewalk, he said. No law against photography. The man's voice remained level. There is when it involves a minor. The photographer hesitated. Another man, positioned near the rear of the car, spoke softly into an earpiece. The energy around the vehicle shifted. This was no longer a casual exchange. You've been here since dismissal, the man said calmly. This is your third photograph. The photographer's smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. You will, he replied. The mother's hands trembled as she knelt slightly in front of Daniel. Stay behind me, she whispered, but Daniel shook his head. I'm not scared, he said. The words made her chest ache. The man's jaw tightened slightly. He stepped closer to the gray sedan. You were warned not to test boundaries, he said quietly. The photographer swallowed. I was told to observe. The admission was subtle, but it landed like a gunshot. Observe? Not random, not coincidence. Deliberate. The man extended his hand. Phone. The photographer hesitated. The second security presence stepped closer. Not aggressive, just inevitable. The phone was handed over. The screen glowed with Daniel's image. 3 frames, clear, intentional. The man studied them without expression. Then he handed the phone to the security operative. "Erase them," he said. The mother's voice came out thin. "Who sent him?" The photographer didn't answer. He didn't have to. The man's gaze lifted slowly. "Tell them," he said evenly, "that daylight does not make him vulnerable." The message was not for the man holding the phone. It was for whoever had sent him. The security team stepped back in quiet synchronization. The photographer slid into the gray sedan without another word and pulled away too quickly. The street returned to normal in seconds. Parents resumed buckling children. The janitor closed the side door. Traffic moved, but the shift had already happened. Daniel tugged on the man's sleeve. "Why did he want my picture?" he asked again. The man crouched slowly to meet his eye level. "Because some people are curious about things they don't understand." "Like dinosaurs?" Daniel asked. A flicker of something almost like a smile crossed his face. "Yes," he said, "like that." Daniel nodded, satisfied enough for now. The mother stood frozen for a moment longer. "This was because of today," she whispered. "Yes," he replied. "And yesterday?" she added. "Yes." Her breath shook. "This wasn't about playground teasing." "No." He straightened. "This is the beginning of pressure." She felt the weight of that settle in her bones. "This was supposed to be a small issue," she said. "It was," he replied quietly, "until it wasn't." Daniel reached for both of them instinctively, one small hand finding hers, the other brushing against the man's fingers. The man didn't pull away, didn't hesitate. He looked down at their joined hands for half a second, then back at the street. The ordinary facade had cracked. A single photograph had shifted the narrative. What began as a school meeting about tone and playground posture had now become something larger, more visible, more dangerous. And as they walked away from the gate together, the mother understood with chilling clarity. The secret wasn't fragile anymore. It was exposed, and someone was already watching. They didn't speak until they were inside the car. Not his car. Not hers. One of the black sedans idled at the curb like it had always been meant to be there. The driver stepped out without being asked, opened the rear door, then retreated to the front without looking back. Daniel climbed in first, surprisingly calm for a child who had just been photographed by a stranger. "Are we getting ice cream?" he asked again, buckling himself in. "Later," she said softly. The door closed. The world outside became muted. The man didn't sit too close to her. He didn't reach for her. He didn't speak immediately. He simply watched the reflection of the school in the tinted window as it grew smaller behind them. "This is what I was trying to avoid," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "And now it's worse." "No," he said. She turned sharply. "It's visible." The distinction felt cruel. Daniel leaned forward slightly between the seats. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. "No," they both answered at the same time. The synchronization startled her. Daniel nodded once and leaned back again, staring out the window. The man's voice dropped lower. "I am not taking him from you." She blinked. "That's not what I'm not filing for custody," he continued. "I'm not asking for shared schedules or courtroom battles." She studied him carefully. "Then what are you asking for?" "Transparency." The word sat heavy between them. "You don't get to demand that," she said quietly. "I'm not demanding it," he corrected. "I'm tying protection to it." Her chest tightened. "That sounds like a demand." "It's a condition," he replied evenly. Silence stretched. The car turned onto a quieter street. "No more crossed-out names," he said. "No more secondary contacts listed like accidents." She looked away. You think this is about ego? He asked. I think this is about control. No, he said softly. It's about strategy. Daniel shifted in his seat, but didn't interrupt. If my name is public, he continued, then anyone who approaches him knows what they're stepping into. And that doesn't scare you? She asked. It deters the wrong kind of courage. Her breath shook. You saw what happened today. Yes. That was with you present. Yes. And if you weren't. His gaze sharpened. Then they wouldn't have approached. The certainty in his tone frightened her more than the incident itself. You can't be everywhere, she whispered. I don't need to be, he said. She stared at him. He finally turned to face her fully. I'm offering legal recognition, he said calmly, not to claim ownership, to create record. What does that mean? It means his documents reflect truth. His school knows who to call. His doctors know family history. His protection is institutional, not improvised. Her pulse pounded. You want your name on everything. Yes. The honesty startled her. And visible security, he added. Not shadows. Not quiet watching. Open presence. That will make him different, she said. He already is. The words landed heavier than accusation. She looked at Daniel, who was tracing shapes in the condensation on the window with one finger. He deserves normal, she whispered. He deserves safe, the man corrected. And if I say no? The car slowed at a red light. He didn't hesitate. Then I withdraw. Her stomach dropped. You'd leave? I'd step back, he clarified. No public filing, no visible protection. I remain listed as emergency contact, and nothing more. That's it? That's it. She searched his face for manipulation. Found none. This isn't leverage? She asked. No. Then what is it? Alignment, he said. The light turned green. I will not protect a ghost, he continued quietly. If I am involved, I am visible, accountable, documented. She swallowed. And what do you expect from me? Stop hiding me. The simplicity of it hurt. No more telling teachers I'm a mistake, he added. No more pretending I'm a family friend. Her chest tightened. I was protecting him. You were isolating him, he said softly. Daniel spoke up from the back seat. Are we fighting? She forced her voice steady. No. The man glanced back at him. We're deciding things, he said calmly. Daniel nodded once. Decide fast, he said. I don't like when people whisper. The truth of that stung. The car pulled up outside her house. No crowd. No spectacle. Just a quiet street and the late afternoon sun. He stepped out first, then opened Daniel's door. The boy climbed down without hesitation. Before walking toward the front steps, he looked back at them both. Are you coming inside? He asked the man. The question wasn't dramatic. It was practical. The man looked at her. This was the moment. Not a courtroom. Not a threat. Just a front yard and a child waiting. I won't step inside unless you say so, he said quietly. Transparency, visibility, accountability. No force, just presence. She felt the weight of years pressing down on her. Hiding had felt like safety, but today had proven otherwise. If your name goes on everything, she said slowly, then so does your responsibility. His gaze didn't waver. It already does. And if your world reaches for him again, it goes through me. No hesitation, no theatrics, just fact. Daniel waited on the steps, watching both of them with unsettling calm. She exhaled. Then no more hiding, she said. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. His jaw softened slightly. No more hiding, he agreed. And for the first time since the school called, the fear in her chest shifted. Not gone, not erased, but shared, visible, structured. Protection had conditions, and she had just agreed to them. The school gym smelled like popcorn and tempera paint. Folding chairs had been arranged in uneven rows. Paper stars hung from the ceiling on thin strings, twisting slowly in the air from the hum of the ventilation system. A hand-painted banner stretched across the back wall. Spring Showcase Night. It was ordinary. Painfully ordinary. Children fidgeted in mismatched costumes near the stage curtains. Parents whispered over programs, phones ready to record shaky videos they would never delete. She sat in the third row, hands folded in her lap, scanning the entrance without meaning to. She told herself she wasn't nervous. This wasn't a courtroom. This wasn't a confrontation. This was a school event. But visibility felt different when it was chosen. The doors at the back of the gym opened. No motorcade, no black cars lining the curb. Just one man walking in alone. No security flanking him. No dramatic pause. He wore a dark jacket instead of a suit. No tie. No visible signal of authority beyond the way people instinctively made room without knowing why. A few parents glanced at him. Whispers flickered briefly, then faded. He wasn't here to intimidate. He was here to sit. He saw her immediately. Their eyes met across the folding chairs. There was no challenge in his expression. No apology either. Just presence. He walked down the aisle slowly and took the empty seat beside her. Not too close. Not distant. Aligned. "Traffic?" she asked softly, surprising herself. A corner of his mouth shifted. "Something like that." On stage, the music teacher tapped the microphone. "Welcome, families," she beamed. "We're so excited to share what the students have been working on." Families. The word landed differently now. She felt him beside her. Not heavy, not imposing. Steady. Daniel peeked out from behind the curtain, scanning the crowd. He spotted her first. Then his gaze shifted, and he saw him. Something changed in the boy's posture instantly. It was subtle. A straightening of the spine. A lift of the chin. Not performance. Not showmanship. Confidence. He didn't wave wildly. He didn't shout. He just held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. And the man nodded once. The smallest gesture. But enough. The performance began. Children shuffled across the stage in a clumsy choreography of bright sneakers and nervous smiles. Parents laughed softly when someone forgot a step. Phones glowed in the dim light. Daniel stepped forward for his part, 2 lines in a short-spoken piece about constellations. He didn't rush, didn't stumble. His voice carried clearly across the gym. "And even when you can't see the stars," he said, eyes scanning the crowd, "they're still there." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. When he finished, polite applause filled the room. He didn't look down at his shoes the way some children did. He didn't retreat quickly. He held himself still for a breath, then walked off stage. The man beside her didn't clap louder than anyone else. He didn't stand. He didn't draw attention. He just watched. Proud. Unmistakably. After the final song, parents flooded the floor to gather children and take photos beneath the paper stars. She stood slowly. He rose with her. Daniel ran toward them, flushed and smiling. "Did you see?" he asked breathlessly. "We saw," she said. "You didn't mess up," the man added. Daniel grinned. "I know." There was no arrogance in it, just certainty. A few parents lingered nearby, curious but cautious. No one approached directly. No one asked questions. It wasn't dramatic. It was normalized. Daniel slipped one hand into hers and the other into his. Not tentatively, not testing. Naturally. The man looked down at their joined hands for a second, then back at her. "You were right," she said quietly. "About what?" "Silence doesn't protect him." He didn't respond immediately. "No," he agreed after a moment. "It isolates him." She watched Daniel laughing with a classmate nearby, posture taller than it had been last week. "You're not overwhelming him," she said. "I'm not here to overwhelm," he replied. "I'm here to be consistent." Consistency. It sounded simple, but it felt radical. "You didn't bring security," she noted. "They're outside," he said calmly. "At a distance. Not hidden, not hovering, present, structured." She exhaled slowly. "I thought standing beside you would make him a target. And now?" She looked around the gym, at teachers chatting, at parents collecting programs, at her son standing between them without shrinking. "I think hiding made him smaller," she admitted. He studied her for a moment. "I won't overshadow you," he said quietly. "That's not what I'm afraid of anymore." Daniel tugged at their hands. "Can we get ice cream now?" he asked, hopeful. She laughed softly. "Yes." They walked toward the exit together. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just 3 figures blending into the crowd. No spectacle, no declaration. Just presence. Outside, the evening air felt cooler. He didn't walk ahead, didn't fall behind. He stayed beside them, and for the first time since the phone call that had started all of this, she didn't feel like she was bracing for impact. Safety hadn't come from distance. It hadn't come from crossed-out names or whispered explanations. It had come from something far more visible. Standing together.